Hi everybody, my name is Leoni Joubert. I'm going to be speaking to you today about tips and tricks for handling kids. So many of you are quite happy dealing with children, others of you are like, oh, there's a child in the waiting room, what do I do? So I thought I'd just share some stuff with you, things that I do in my practice, hopefully it'll help. And then I'm going to be giving another presentation later on about how to deal with more complicated or cases like special needs, ADHD, autism, etc. But let's start with the basics. So welcome to level 3 of lockdown. You have unlocked alcohol. Well done. Woohoo! I tell you, it's been insane. I hope you guys have been okay. But who would have thought, right? If someone had said 4 months ago, listen, come March, you're going to be sitting inside for 2 months, doing nothing, going nowhere, buying nothing. It's been quite a crazy ride, right? So I hope everybody is back to sort of the new normal. Don't you just hate that phrase? Anyway, but I hope you're back to work and things are going okay and you're surviving and staying safe and staying sane. Woohoo! Because yeah, that's that. So we're speaking to you about that. I've decided to rather record the lecture because the Wi-Fi where we are is a little bit like, so I don't want to be doing a live presentation and the next thing there's no Wi-Fi and everything comes to a grinding halt. So I've recorded my lecture. I'm going to try and be live when it is broadcast so that you guys can ask me questions in the chat box and I can chat to you afterwards, not a problem at all, or even just answer you in the chat box while the lecture's running. We'll make a plan. And otherwise, you're welcome to email me. My email is iacle@iafrica.com, IACLE@iafrica.com with any questions and I'll get back to you. It's actually quite fortuitous that I get to do this because my pediatric and binocular vision and pediatric low vision conference was supposed to be happening now in June in Santon. Nicely fully subscribed, everybody was ready to go, and then no, stay home. So my conference is not happening anymore. It's been postponed till next June. So everything is the same. All the speakers are the same. Everything's the same. It's just 1 year later. So yes, it's like everybody, 2020, just crossed that year out. Nothing is happening. So it's insane. So it's great. This way, at least I still get to do some PED stuff. You go hopefully get to learn something. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my video off and share my screen with you. And I'll carry on talking and we can see how that goes. So let's do that first. We'll stop the video and I'll share my screen. Right, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking to you about tips and tricks for examining kids, as I said, and we're going to be looking at young kids from baby all the way through to high school. Remember that in South Africa, pediatrics is, or pediatric patient is classified as somebody up to the age of 18 years. So that's quite old. So we'll go through them. Right, so where do we even start? Don't think, it's just a foregone conclusion as to how things happen. The thing about seeing children is that every case is different and oftentimes what works on one doesn't work on the other. So I quite like doing PEDS just because of that. It's never boring. But when you're thinking about where to start with a child, think about why they are actually there. Some practitioners, pediatric practitioners who do more in-depth kind of pediatric testing, oftentimes will email or send the parents forms, case history kinds of forms for more background information before they even get to the practice. And that's fine if you want to do that. It does make it a little bit easier. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. It depends on the kind of examination. So the reason you want to find out why they're there is so that you know how to address their problem, their main complaint. Always make sure once you've seen the patient and you've conducted the examination that their questions are answered. It's very important. The reason that they came to see you has been addressed. So I like starting my evaluation in the waiting room already. My practice has got a CCTV camera system for obvious reasons, just because, that's how we have to live nowadays. But it actually serves another function in that I can sit in my office and I can see what's going on in the waiting room. So it sort of gives me a bit of an idea already what you're dealing with. If the child is literally walking across the reception desk and climbing up the frame rack, you know what to expect. If they're sitting coloring in quietly, well, that's another story. The other thing is also it's nice to approach those children while they're in the waiting room rather than just hauling them straight into an examining room. Let them settle down a little bit. The other thing about children is choosing the kind of age-appropriate tests to do with them, or if they are special needs, choosing a kind of a test that's up to their intellectual ability. And with kids, you've got to be fast. You can't take your time. Their attention span is really, really, very, very, very low, which suits me fine because mine is just as bad. And the other thing is adapting your consultation. So don't think that doing this 7 and 4 and out the door routine, test by test, everything nicely in sequence is going to work with the child. It just doesn't. You have to try something. If you don't find joy with that, take another test, try something else, adapt as you go. So it's literally an adapt or die kind of situation. The other thing is don't think about what you can't do. Like, oh, no, I can't get this child to sit still for rec. Oh, I can't get them to use the Risley prisms or whatever it is to get a 4-year. Just move on, leave it, and go and do something else. So concentrate on what you can do. You can do a lot, and there's a lot of tests that can give you a lot of information. So here we go. As I was talking about the waiting room, first thing is to make the waiting room a fun place to be. So this is my waiting room, well, part of it in my practice, and it's quite fun. The kids love coming in here. So the thing is, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because kids from outside will see the thing and run in and come and play. So be careful of the situation where the children come from outside and just take over. So this is for patients only, and yeah, don't turn yourself into a daycare center. But on the other hand, the kids love coming here. They find it fun and they sit and they play, and it's very attractive for them. And it gets them settled and it makes them happy to be there. The worst thing you can do is have this staunch kind of very clinical looking waiting area. You want to get the kids in and make them comfy and make them feel that they're in a non-threatening place. And also you need to be fun, right? If kids see you having fun, they're going to have fun. Have lots of toys and stuff. They love it. I love it. It's all good. It makes your life much easier. Don't wear a white coat. They've been to other doctors. You need to be the fun doctor. You need to be the one that they want to come and see. And they really do. When they get to know you and they learn that it's not going to hurt and everything is quite a fun thing to do, they can't wait to come back for their next eye test. So, as I was saying about the waiting room exam, I often go and I just go and sit while the kid is busy playing and coloring and doing whatever. I will go and sit with the parents in the waiting room on the couch and just chat to them. Because if you take the child into the consulting room and they're sitting on your chair and then you start chatting to the parents, they're going to get bored very, very quickly. So this way they're still carrying on doing their thing, knowing that it's fine and it's a fun place and it's all good. So get a case history, sit down and, just relax. Makes the parents nice and comfy. It makes you, get the information you need while the child is not bored to tears sitting in your chair. So what all can you tell from looking at the child in the waiting room? So as you might or might not know, I'm also a trained nature guide through FUGASA. So Wayne and I redid our training and we're now trained nature guides. We can take you on tours and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things we learned in nature guiding, especially when we were learning about trees, strangely enough, is the GISS. GISS stands for General Impression, Size and Shape. So I use this abbreviation for children as well, because they are sort of, sometimes like trees. Let's not say that out loud, but anyway, yes. So look at the child, get an idea. What do they look like? Do they look whatever your belief of normal is? Are they an FLK? You guys should know what that stands for. If you don't, I'm not going to tell you. But yes, the external appearance of a child will tell you a lot. And just by looking at a kid, you can get a ton of information. While they're sitting playing, you can see, are their eyes turning in? Do they look like they're sitting really, really close to the coloring in book? Are they straining? Do they squint? Look at their eye size and shape. Is one bigger than the other? Is there a lid droop? Position of their lids. If they do wear specs, how are they wearing them? Do they wear them properly? Are they looking over the top? Are they looking underneath? That already tells you a lot. And look at the facial symmetry of their, of their orbit, and also their head posture. Do they tilt their head constantly to one side? Are their eyes teary or watery? Are their eyes red? Is the cornea clear? So, I mean, literally sitting there looking, you take one look at somebody, you can get a ton of information. Does it look like they have an infection? Are they rubbing their eyes? Are their eyes, watery and teary? Is there discharge? So a ton of stuff just from looking at them sort of surreptitiously while you're busy chatting to the parents. So let's start off by talking about babies and when to do the exam and what you can and can't do, because a lot of people think you cannot test a baby's eyes. And I mean, you can literally test your goldfish's eyes if you wanted to. It's pretty much the same. You just need to concentrate on non-verbal tests and what you can see and what information you can get. And if it has to be more objective rather than, objective and subjective, comparison, then, well, that's what it has to be. Do what you can. So when I'm seeing these babies, I often ask the parents to schedule the exam not during normal nap time. Because if they're coming through and the kid is trying to be functional while they're usually used to napping at that time, it just makes your life really, really difficult and very hard for the kid as well. So it's usually earlier in the morning when the kid is awake and attentive. And what really helps as well is for the parents to bring the kid's bottle, because that can be used as a bit of a tool during the exam. If the child is breastfeeding, well, then you don't want to be using those as tools, if you know what I mean. So yes. Another thing with children or babies specifically is that you have to be very, very fast. Their attention is very, very limited. In fact, there have been studies to show that a baby, can keep its attention for a maximum of 30 seconds at a time. So you have to be able to do whatever it is you have to do in 30 seconds. So work fast. Make your consulting room nice and bright and decorated and fun place to be. And as I said, you're going to concentrate more on objective assessments rather than subjective responses. You can't expect the child to read the eye chart or even fixate in the distance, whatever you want to do. So do what you can. Don't worry about stuff that you can't do. It'll give you enough information along the line. So you actually do know more than you think. I know you think you don't, but you do. And as I mentioned earlier, that some tests will give you a ton of information. So I'm going to be discussing specifically Bruckner with you, which is a brilliant test to use on infants and gives you a really lot of information at one time. So you can do one more thing you can get more information from one test than just one thing. So as I said, remember, no white coat. I'm not going to go through those equipment lists because I'm going to be speaking to you about them yourself anyway, individually. Anyway. All right. So remember, and this is very important, that babies are not just little adults. They are nonverbal. They have different proportions in terms of their head size to their body. So frames that work for adults are not just downscaled to fit on a baby's face. They have to have specially designed stuff. And so don't treat them like little adults and try and make them do stuff as you would a normal adult. Even normal equipment won't work. So I'll speak to you about that now. And remember, this is why people don't like seeing babies sometimes, because remember, they can be icky. And yeah, parents are always a good thing to have as a barrier, I suppose, is the word to use. So I'm going to show you a video on how not to do it, and you'll see why I used a doll in the video and not a real person. So this is really how not to do an infant exam. This is more appropriate actually to the coronavirus thing than you would think. It was done as a joke, But I tell you now, it's actually so relevant. It's scary. PPE all the way, right? This freaks me out. My students used to do this. You can't put a child in normal chairs and stands. It just doesn't work. The equipment doesn't fit. Nothing works. And of course, the child's going to fall off their chair and the mother's going to sue you. And when I see people using a phoropter for a baby, it drives me insane. Or trying to. It's never going to work. Ta-da! Maybe that's not the best. But it also works for autorefraction and keratometry and fundus photographs. Not. Okay. So just kidding, guys. Obviously, that's not the way to do it. Right, so let's talk about infants. How are we going to get a visual acuity from a child who cannot speak? There are a couple of ways to do this. One of the things I really like, and that's very, very easy, is to do the optokinetic nystagmus, or the OKN. So you can buy an OKN drum. I've got one. They're a little clunky, but they do work well, but they're quite expensive. And obviously, if you're going to be doing examinations outside of your practice, you're going to carry all this stuff around, it's going to be too much. So I have an iPad app, an OKN iPad app, which is actually very cool, because not only can you adjust the speed on the app, you can also adjust the size of the lines on the actual test. So it's very cool because you can then calculate the expected VA from doing that. So remember to do it monocularly and binocularly, because it's different as to when the monocular of optokinetic nystagmus develops, whether it's nasal or temporal. The one that develops earlier than the other one. So do them monocularly, do them binocularly. The other thing you can also do is you can change the rotate the OKN drum or the app and go up and down as well. So not only then are you checking whether there's VA or not, but you're also checking the eye movements. It'll give you a good idea if there's a problem with an eye movement. So remember, optokinetic nystagmus is a complete reflex. You can't suppress it. You can do it on adults as well. It's something that doesn't ever go away. So if somebody pretends that they can't see and you do an OKN and you find nystagmus, chances are good they can see. So yeah, it's used oftentimes to check for people who are pretending or trying to claim for benefits for non-sighted people when they can actually see. But it's a really cool test, very, very fast. It gives you a gross approximation of VA. It's not going to tell you the child can see 6'6". You can make a calculation using some trigonometry and the angle of subtents of those lines and the distance away from the child that you can see them. So a good way to just check that they do have VA. And remember, as I said, do it monocularly and binocularly. Another thing that you can use to check whether a child can see or not is a reflex called the vestibulo-ocular reflex. And when you do this reflex, it's pretty cool in that it can tell you whether a child can see or whether there's actually brain damage as well. So by 7 days, a child has a full range of eye movements already. They're not going to be very accurate. So they'll have pursuits and they'll have saccades, not very, very accurate yet, but they're there already. So if you do a vestibulo-ocular reflex test and there's no response, it can either be due to a really bad, problem in the brain. So they could have a problem with the medial longitudinal fasciculus or some kind of central nervous system damage or damage in the brainstem, or they could also have an abnormality of any of their extraocular muscles. So how it works is you take the child and you tilt them 45 degrees up towards you and you rotate or you spin around, and it will elicit this reflex. So you spin around a couple of times, and as you stop, you'll see that the eyes are jerking, and this jerking stops in about 5 seconds. So that's the way the textbooks say to do it. I do not do it that way, and you'll see why. Now, please, if you're squeamish, look away now. But this is how the test is done. So textbook says, take child, pick them up, tilt them towards you at 45 degrees, and spin around. Okay? Spin, 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 and then stop. But the problem is, watch out for this. Okay? Holding the child up there, and they've been spinning around. It's delightful. Ew. So, better way to do it, sit down on a chair. I often sit down on a chair that's got, you know, just able to rotate, and hold the child like this and spin them around. This way, if they do throw up, it's not all over your face. And also, sometimes what I'd rather do is I'll rather get the parents to do this, because you don't want to be dropping the kid, right? So anyway, let the child spin around, watch for those nystagmus, and watch how long, count how long it takes for those nystagmus to be suppressed. It should take quick, 5 seconds, and the child's eye should stabilize. If a child is blind, they can continue for up to 30 seconds, which is quite interesting. So the thing with the VOR is induce the nystagmus and then see how long it takes for it to stop. It has to stop within about 5 seconds. Okay, another kind of way to check for visual acuity in infants is by doing a preferential looking test. So you can get preferential looking cards like the teller acuity cards, but they are horrendously expensive. And you hold them up and check whether the child is looking at the grating or at the gray side, and it gives a pretty good indication of VA. So by 6 months, you should be able to get the VA of the child, of an infant, down to about 624 with using these teller acuity cards. So 624 to 6120. Remember, it's done binocularly, done at about 50 centimeters. So good test, but horribly expensive. Then the textbooks all talk about a thing called resistance to occlusion. In other words, if a child has got one good eye and one really bad eye, and you close the good eye, they will become very fussy. So they will resist that occlusion. Now, anybody who's ever done the test on a baby will know that they don't like having their eyes touched and or covered, whether they can see well or not. And really, it's such an arbitrary thing. So I must be very honest, the resistance to occlusion, they are not going to like you closing their eyes anyway. Either one, whether they're good, whether they're bad. So if you can make it work, fine. Another thing is fix and follow. It's just basically giving an interesting target to a child and watching if they will fix and follow. So for how long do they accurately fixate on it? Can they track it? And that is a way that you can break it down to a specific kind of visual acuity. Very, very gross though. The ophthalmologist seem to like using the fix and follow technique. The other test that is used with babies is called the hundreds and thousands test. So hundreds and thousands are those tiny little cake decorations that you get, right? If you sprinkle on the cake. So what happens here is you take a clean sheet of paper, you take a couple of these hundreds and thousands, you put the little child's finger in its mouth and then bring it to the hundreds and thousands on the page, take it back to its mouth so it can taste and see the little balls that are there, and then wait and see if they can do it themselves again. And that size of 100,000 at a kind of 30 centimeter distance from the child is an approximately 624 VA. So you're going to have issues now, of course, because parents don't want the kids to have sugar and there's coloring, blah, blah, blah. So, be careful here. I mean, a couple of hundreds and thousands are not going to induce some kind of sugar crisis in the child, but once again, just gauge it on how the parents feel and see what else you can do. Yeah, it's a bit crazy. So that's how you would get VA in infants. Of course, the other way to get VA is just by looking at what the refractive area is and extrapolating from that. So not so easy to do. And also there could be other issues. So to get the refractive error of a child, the most inexpensive way is obviously by doing retinoscopy or Bruckner. That can give you a gross idea of refractive error. And then, of course, using a pediatric autorefractor is going to give you a much more accurate and very, very fast indication of refractive error. So we'll go through them one at a time. So if you're talking about doing rate on infants, you can't do normal rate on infants because the normal number 4 is not going to work. They're not going to be able to fixate in the distance and pay attention. You can put up your little chart in the distance, they are not going to work. They're not going to watch it. I have a video screen that plays constant little kiddie targets, which is great, but usually more for older kids. The babies don't like looking far away for very long. They're much more happy fixating close by. So you have to use Mahindra. Now Mahindra is quite an old retinoscopy technique, and they've actually done some studies to change it and make it better. So the modified Mahindra works at 50 centimeters. Remember, it's a monocular test. You've got to give the child, it's in a dark room, so you've got to give the child some time to dark adapt. You close off one eye by either using a patch or an occluding pair of specs. As I said, that in and of itself is already a bit of a problem usually, but let's see if you can make it work. And then you do your number 4 and you subtract minus 0.75 if it's an infant, or you subtract 1 if the child is over 2 years old. So the previous Mahindra, remember, used to just subtract 125 from everybody, right? So this is modified, and it's been shown to be a little bit more accurate. So let's say, for example, you are doing Mahindra and you're getting +2 on your red. You will subtract minus 0.75, so that it will be +125 for an infant, or it'll be just +1 for a child. That will be your red result. So the other thing is to make your rate more accurate is to do a wet rate. So you actually cycloplegic the child. Much, much, much better. This way you know that the accommodative system is knocked out. You want to do this especially if you're thinking there's any kind of accommodative strabismus. So in young babies, you want to be using very small amounts. So 1 drop of 0.5% cyclopentolate if the child is younger than 3 months. I have to be very honest with you. I don't often cycloplegic children at 3 months. Remember, the accommodative system, everything is still developing. In fact, the retina hasn't even finished developing before the age of 6 months yet. So now you're trying to get this accurate kind of refractive error under the age of 3 months. I would just wait a little bit, or I wouldn't cycloplegic yet until the retina is actually developed at 6 months. Obviously, if you're seeing something else, like you've got a white pupil and all that kind of stuff, it's a different story. Then you want to do what you can do, but just be aware that, remember that the retina hasn't developed until the age of 6 months yet. So generally, what I use is I use 1% of cyclopentolate. And if you're having trouble getting the drop in the eye, you can actually put it in a little spray bottle and spray the cyclopentolate, the cycloplegic of your choice, onto the child's eye. Enough of it will get in to let it work. So it takes usually about 45 minutes to work, and then you can do your examination, and it lasts only for about 12 hours. So it's not like atropine. The ophthalmologists love using atropine, and they atropinize the children for like 3 days beforehand and all the rest of it. But it's really quite bad stuff, and it's got some horrible side effects. Yes, if the child has got an accommodative esotropia, atropine, good. You want to get as much, plus out of that exam as you can. Otherwise, I really find cyclopentolate is perfectly fine to use. And it relieves about a 1.5 diopter residual accommodation anyway, which means that I don't even subtract anything. So if you're finding a plus 150 when you've put your cyclopentolate in and waited for them, then you just leave it, and that's exactly what it is. So it's 150, it's 150. That's what it is. You don't even have to subtract or add or anything to it. So I find it quite nice. And remember, when you're doing retinoscopy, or refraction or whatever it is you're trying to do on an infant. Rather use lens bars or an infant trial frame. Don't try and put them behind a phoropter. It's never going to work. So loose lenses and a trial frame. You get really nice little infant ones that have got elastic bands that tie on, because remember, they don't really have a bridge. So yes, use those. One of my favorite tests to do in infants is a test called Bruckner. It uses your ophthalmoscope, and it gives you so much information you cannot believe. This one test will tell you a ton and ton of stuff. So it can tell you whether the child has got strabismus. It'll tell you if they've got any kind of refractive error. It'll tell you if one eye is better than the other. It'll tell you if there's any kind of media opacities. You cannot believe how much information you can get literally in 5 seconds. So what you do is you take your ophthalmoscope, you stand at 1 meter, you put your ophthalmoscope at plano, or maybe at +1. I usually just put it at plano, and you look through your ophthalmoscope. Choose the biggest light that you can in your ophthalmoscope ring. So you want to be able to illuminate the child's eyes, both of them at the same time, while you're looking through your ophthalmoscope. So you're standing at 1 meter, dim the lights. The kid will look at your lights because there's nothing else to look at, and they love looking at lights anyway. So you can do it further away. It's supposed to be more accurate if you do it further away, but the problem with it being further away is that the child is then less likely to look at your light because it's further away and not as interesting. And also it's a bit more difficult for you to see the actual light crescent. So you're looking at the light reflex through the ophthalmoscope. It's supposed to be more reliable also when the infant is more than 8 months old, but really it doesn't matter. You can do it on a very young child already. So you're looking for the red reflex. So stand at 1 meter, look through your ophthalmoscope with the widest, roundest sort of bit of light, illuminate both eyes at the same time, and look at the red reflex. So I'll show you what I mean. So if you're seeing a red reflex in one eye that's brighter than the other eye, that indicates which eye is the strabismic eye. So in this case, you're looking at this child, and you can see that the reflex is brighter in that right eye. And also if you look at the Hirschberg here, you can see that that child has probably got an esotropia, but we're going to get to that later. The reason for the reflex being brighter in the strabismic eye rather than the other one is due to the fact that they're not using the macula, or they're not fixating with the foveal area, which, as you know, has got fewer retinal layers, and so it doesn't reflect light as well as the rest of retina. So in this case, the left eye is fixating and looks darker, and the right eye is off axis, and the reflex of that light is coming off the area, not the fovea, not the macula, and therefore brighter. But it's not quite as simple as that, but that's a sort of a simple explanation for that working. So here we're looking at a child. You can see that the red reflex in the right eye, once again, is brighter than the left eye. The other thing you can use Bruckner for is to check for retinoblastoma. So remember, any kind of white pupil is not a good sign. It's either a cataract, Coates disease. There's a whole list of stuff that can cause it, but the one that you've got to really worry about is a retinoblastoma. So watch out for these. This is an emergency referral as quickly as you can get one. Okay, the other thing you use Bruckner for is to check for a refractive error by looking at where the crescent is. So you'll see there's a bright crescent of light here, right? So there's a crescent of light, and that's what you're looking for. If the crescent of light is at the bottom, they are myopic. If it's at the top, they're hyperopic. I'll explain that to you now. So in this case, this child is myopic in his right eye and has got a cataract in the left eye. You can see the media opacity over there. So this is how it works. An inferior crescent is always myopic. Okay, this is sort of the size of the crescent. Don't worry about this too much. If the child is hyperopic, it's a superior crescent at the top and usually bigger than 2 millimeters. It's normal to have a superior crescent, but a tiny one. Okay, that indicates less than 1 diopter of hyperopia, which is fine. Astigmatism, a crescent that is tilted will indicate astigmatism. Okay, so Bruckner, look at it, it gives you information about, is there a strab? Is there any kind of ametropia? Is there anisometropia? Is there a media opacity? 5 seconds is all it takes. Very cool test to use. Brilliant. So here we go. Let's go through some examples. Myopic crescent, inferior in the left eye. Can you see it? Look for the bright crescent, right? Look for the bright crescent. Nothing in this eye. Here we can sort of do it on everybody at the same time. Let's go through this one. Very cool. So let's look at baby first. Baby over here, look for the bright crescent, inferior, myopic. Remember, it's not normal for an infant to be myopic at all. Most children are born hyperopic, and that decreases slowly so that by the age of 6, there's almost less than 1 diopter of hyperopia remaining. So to see myopia in an infant is very, very unusual. You've got to monitor these kids very carefully. So that's a baby with myopia. Let's look at mom. Mom is a bit odd. Mom has got a superior crescent there in her right eye and an inferior crescent in her left eye. So she's short-sighted in her left eye and far-sighted, hyperopic in her right eye. Very cool. So I'm going to do the whole family all in one go. Happy days. The other way to get obviously an idea for refractive area is by having an instrument to do autorefraction. There are a couple of pediatric autofractors out there. They're pretty good. I use the Spot from Welsh Allen. Brilliant. You can actually use this not just for pediatric patients, all the way up to 100 years old, according to their little thing. The Plus Optics, very cool little instrument, but that is dedicated to pediatric patients up to the age of about 12. Or it was the last time that I had one and used one. It was limited to age 12. Both very, very cool instruments. Make your life complete joy. Really, it's the best money you'll ever spend. So these instruments, really, very quick. Take the reading within a few seconds, give you lots of information, tell you about the pupil sizes, tell you about squints, tell you about any media opacities. Really awesome. You can print reports out, give it to the patient. Very good for screening. It'll make your life an absolute joy. So yes, autorefractors. Okay, so we've done VA, we've done refractive error. If you want to look at ocular alignment in babies or in infants, obviously the easiest way is to just look, right? But just be careful. Remember that children have epicanthal folds because their bridges are still developing. So it oftentimes makes them look as if they're squint when they're not. So little babies, very small, low bridges, develop these or have these folds called epicanthal folds, and it makes them look as if they're strabismic. So it's called a pseudostrabismus. So the parents will bring them in and complain that the child can't see, or I mean, not can't see, that the child is squint. But when you do your examination, you'll often find that it's just a pseudo squint. And you can explain it to them. You can pull the skin away from the nose bridge and show them the effect that that has. But you need to make sure that that child doesn't actually have a problem with their ocular alignment. So one way to do that is by doing the Hirschberg test. So you're looking at the light reflex in the corneas. Okay, 50 centimeters. Patient is fixating the light. Remember, you have to start with doing angle kappa first. So you do it monocularly first to see where the normal corneal reflex is, monocular, then they open both eyes and you check those reflexes relative to the monocular positioning. So here we go. Usually the reflex is located slightly to the nasal side of central, and then you look at whether the other reflex is in the same position, relatively speaking. So here we have, for example, when the reflex here is central, this eye is fixating. This reflex is slightly to the nasal side. So this child has obviously got an exotropia. I mean, you can look at that and see that anyway, but that's what you need. So if the reflex is located temporal to the center of the pupil, it's a negative angle kappa. Okay, if it's located nasally, it's a positive angle kappa. So normally it's positive, all right? So slight kind of exo looking thing, but that's just the difference between the optical and the visual axis when you're doing angle kappa. So don't worry about it. So compare the two, they should be even. If the reflex is more nasal to center, the child is exo. If the reflex is more temporal to center, the child is ESO. Okay, here we go. Normal, there we go. So off to the temporal side indicates an esotropia, in this case a left esotropia, and the same can obviously be done when you're looking at the vertical ones. So here's the central one, and here the reflex is down or slightly inferior to central, meaning the child will have a right hypertropia. Okay, so that's the way you're going to check for pseudo-esotropia. Those reflexes will stay central. Like this little baby, we'll show him now. This child has kappa, all right? So remember what I said, that normal is 0.5 millimeters off-center, positive towards the nasal side. Normal. When both eyes are open, you can see how this reflex has moved much more nasal, indicating that the child is exotropic. This little kid, pseudo-esotropia, 2 central reflexes, but when you look at the child, who basically looks like baby George Bush, but never mind, we won't hold that against him. Pseudo-esotropia, the child looks like they are esotropic, but they're not, if you're looking at those reflexes. Okay, cool. Moving swiftly along. If you want to neutralize that reflex that you've seen with the angle kappa and the Hirschberg, what you can do is you do a test called Krimsky, and you put a prism in front of the fixating eye until you see that those two ocular alignment reflexes are the same. Okay, so in this case, you're fixating with this eye, you're putting you can see that the child is obviously ESO, so you're putting a base out in front of that eye until the reflexes are equally centered. Good. Of course, the good old color test is going to tell you exactly what to do. So with a child, remember, they don't like having anything in front of them, especially babies. They will try and grab that cover, they'll try and dodge behind it. So it's easier if you literally put your hand just on their head gently and use your thumb as a cover, as an occluder, so that it's not something that they can grab easily. And use a toy or something that's got a nice kind of interesting thing to fixate. Don't use just, you know, the look at my nose or whatever it is that you normally say. And then you can neutralize, obviously, the cover, uncover thing with prism bars or loose prisms, whichever you prefer. Some other things you might want to do on infants, or definitely have to do on infants, is obviously ophthalmoscopy. You have to check the ocular health. It's nice to do ophthalmoscopy once you've cyclopleged the child. It makes your life so much easier. The other thing that I find really good to do is to do ophthalmoscopy with the parent standing, holding the child over their shoulder, and you can just swap the child from one shoulder to the other and look at the eyes if you have to, because it's much easier than the child being in the parent's lap and you trying to bend down and you can see what gets really awkward. Remember that kids find binocular indirect ophthalmoscopy a little bit scary. You're approaching with this big thing in your head, so they start screaming. It's just nasty. So if you don't want to do normal direct ophthalmoscopy and you want to do BIO, but you know the kid is becoming niggly, but you want to get a better field of view, then use a +20 loose trial lens and use your normal direct ophthalmoscope, and it'll be a monocular image, but you'll get a much bigger idea, a bigger field of view. So do it that way. You can also use the new DI. It's a kind of attachment that you buy for your phone that turns your iPhone or your cell phone into a handheld fundus camera. Very cool. Limited field of view, a little bit difficult to use, but when the patient is dilated, certainly easier, and everybody's got a phone, right? And you can record, you can do videos, it's very cool. So DI is a nice new little instrument that I use. Some companies are selling handheld fundus cameras. The pictures are not great, but remember that's what you're going to have to do with a baby. You can also check the anterior auxiliary kind of bits with the illuminator or a handheld slit lamp to check the anterior chamber, check the cornea, and all of that kind of stuff. When you're doing eye movements, it's easier to do a doll's head reflex. So you put the child in the parent's lap, they're sitting up straight, and you physically turn the head left or right or up or down. The eyes should stay pointing towards you and then slowly go out, and that way you can check the ocular muscles. Or remember when we were doing optokinetic nystagmus or the vestibular ocular reflex, that also indicates if there's a problem with eye movement. So once again, you're using all kinds of tests to try and get more information. So you can also do normal pursuits and saccades, look, using toys with lights and something that's interesting, whatever it is that you want to make work. Convergence, also use a nice bright colored toy, use something with a light in, something with sound, it doesn't matter. You're just checking the eye movements in terms of the extraocular muscles. The baby bottle comes in handy for checking convergence as well, or for eye movements. You take the bottle and they will often follow that. So really cool. Remember to do the cover test in different directions of gaze if you're worrying about incomitant strabismus. So use your thumb as the occluder and move the head and do whatever you have to do. It's almost impossible to do fields in babies because they're not going to sit behind a normal field test, Humphrey's analyzer, and do anything. So doing fields on an infant is really, really difficult. You have to try and just use finger puppets or something, and it's just a gross estimation. So what happens is the child is sitting on the parent's lap. It's better to have a helper for this. You can stand behind, or the helper can sit in front of the child, whichever is easier, and use finger puppets and gradually bring them in from behind the child towards the field of view. As soon as the child turns their head, you can assume that they're aware of that image getting into their periphery, and it'll give you a very gross estimate of the child's visual fields. But it's better than nothing, right? Pupils, do those in light time and do them in dark. Remember, you've got to check both and make sure that everything's working. And tonometry, also very difficult to do, so you can use a toner pen or an eye care tonometer, whichever one works better for you. Very cool stuff we get now. So this is a little illuminator. I bought these in the United States. I don't know if they're available here. I think you can get them through Danker. So it's a nice one that you've got one here for, it's got a cobalt blue light, so you can use with fluorescein and check the integrity of the cornea, or if you're worrying about a corneal infection or foreign body or whatever it is. Very cool to use. And then there's a normal white one, and it's got a magnifying lens over here, so you get close and they work very well. Nice and handy, easy to transport, very cool. This is the handheld slit lamp. You can see how cute these kids are. They love looking at the light. So this works quite well because you're not going to get that child behind the slit lamp, right? Unless you duct tape them like I did. Okay, so those are the infants. Remember that a lot of the stuff that you use in the infants, you can use in the older kids as well. The only thing you really want to modify here is how well you're going to get the VA. So you're going to modify your VA tests to match the age of the child. And also, as the children get older, you'll be able to start doing normal ret when they start looking at that distance target, right? So get cool, interesting videos and stuff like that. And remember, cycloplegic exams are definitely going to be necessary at some point, especially if there's a strab. And they are much more interactive now. So they'll respond, especially if you've got cool toys and stuff like that. So just modify things. When we talk about visual acuity in toddlers, most of the acuity tests start off binocularly and then go to monocular because A, they don't like being occluded, and B, that's just how they're designed. But use an eye patch or those really cool occluder specs you can get now, and you want to try and get your VA monocularly as early as you can. Also, shorter testing distances and quicker tests. So VAs are usually done on toddlers at 3 meters, not at 6. Do them quickly and use single things. So really, it's not easy for children to do directional responses as you think. So those tumbling E kinds of tests, really difficult for some children to do. I don't like them, I must be very, very honest with you. And also, you're not going to get a verbal response very accurately in children younger than 2, you know, so 2 or 3, and then they'll start talking after that and get a much better feedback. So matching responses work quite well. They understand what to do, and those work quite well for any age. It doesn't really matter. If you give them a 2 alternative force choice test, so which one is it, they will also respond well to that. But I'll show you what I mean. So here we go. Here's some different kinds of tests for little toddlers. So you get the Cardiff test, the Bach candy bead test. That's this one down here. This is the Cardiff test. So this is almost like a kind of a contrast sensitivity, more Taylor acuity kind of thing, where they're looking at the one that's easier to see. Lear symbols. The test that I really, really like is the iPad test called the K-picture test. And this works very, very well. You can do it on kids really from the age of 2.5, 3. And first of all, they like the iPad, it's interactive, and it works very well. Broken wheel acuity test, that also works okay. Tumbling E, not a fan. I have to be very, very honest with you. HOTB test, also not a fan. This is a matching kind of test. Tumbling E, they've got a point where the E goes. Not as easy as you think to do that. It takes time to explain. It's picky, it's fiddly. I don't like it. And the child's got a 1 in 4 chance of guessing what it is, right? Anyway, so yeah, just choose your battles. So what is a normal VA for kids in preschool? Because I often get asked that. What is a normal thing? When must we start referring these kids? When do they need to, when do we not need to start getting worried? So kids that are 3 years old, you can usually get 20 to 20/40 VA on a child. It's about 3. That's normal, easily, using those kinds of tests. And by the time the child reaches 4 or 5, they should be at least able to get 20/30 or equivalent. So they'll use mainly tests like the Fuchs forms or the Landolt-C tests to get those results. But it really does depend a lot on the child, and also how well you respond to them and they respond to you, and the feedback that you can get. So you might want to try different kinds of tests and see which one gives you the better result. Use the most sophisticated tests that the child does respond to. Okay, so oculomotor tests for older children. You can start using these more formalized tests like the DEM if they know numbers, or the NSUCO evaluation test. Also, an eye tracker can be used on any kind of child really that can fixate. So the new eye trackers work very well. They can do pursuits, they can do saccades. You can do it in different directions of gaze. Very, very cool. As I said, if you're measuring near point of convergence, try and use an interesting target, not a pen torch. Babies, a pen torch is still okay, but in older kids, when they start becoming toddlers, the attention really is going to be kept much better with an interesting toy. Right, so how do we check binocular vision in toddlers? Remember, cover tests will work on any age, and they give us really, really good information. So they're completely objective. The patient is not going to be able to, suppress or do whatever they have to do. You can also use a Worth 4-dot test, also available in iPad forms. So there are lots of programs that have got many optometry tests that will run on a tablet, which is really great because it cuts down on the clutter of equipment that you need, makes it completely portable if you're going to do screenings and stuff. So really nice. Spectrum from Digital Optometry, you make really cool binocular vision tests, give lots of information very quickly. There's a test called the Spectrum 8 test, where it'll tell you whether the child is suppressing, whether there's diplopia, whether there's strabismus, or even whether there's an ARC. So very cool. So really, binocular vision tests, modify them according to what the child can do and what they can understand. If it doesn't work, just move on. Cover test, brilliant, gives you tons of information. Don't underestimate the cover test. Okay, in children, in toddlers, trial frames are easier to use still, easier to put lenses in and all the rest of it. But some of them will start sitting still from the age of about 4 or 5 and be able to sit behind a phoropter if you really want to do that. you need to use a booster seat. I've got a booster seat that I use on my chair, which works very, very well because they're not going to fit behind the equipment normally. PAEDS autorefractors, remember some of them will come out with a +3 pair of specs to check for latent hyperopia. And always remember that cycloplegic refraction in Mahindra is also still able to be used. If you want to check what's happening close by, remember you can do your MEM ret and use pictures for that so that you know that they're responding well. As they get older, you're just going to start using the normal kinds of words that come with MEM cards. What other tests you want to do? You can do color vision now. You can't really do color vision on babies, but in young toddlers you can do it. iPad has got a really, really nice color vision test. Remember that you don't want the child to touch your iPad screen with their snotty fingers, especially now with this whole COVID thing, right? So you can give them a small little paintbrush and they can paint over the numbers that they see on the color vision test. Or there's a really really good color vision test called the Color Vision Test Made Easy, which is a proper kind of color vision plates that you can buy. And they work very well. They've got little pictures of a car and a yacht and a house and a blah, blah, that's hidden away. So those work really well. So try and find that. Stereo testing has to be done. And stereo starts developing already by the age of 6 months. And it improves rapidly. So you can use a random stereo test, the stereo fly, Lang stereo test, whatever you want to do close by. The Spectrum series of digital computer testing systems has a distance stereo test, which is very, very cool as well. Right, so basically that is it for now. A really, really, really short thing. Remember, with the older kids, as we get into teenagers and stuff, you can start using normal testing procedures. Use the most sophisticated test that the kid will be able to see. Okay, so there you go. That was a really quick overview of very, very basic stuff, but hopefully you came away with something that you can just go and implement in your practice right away. That Bruckner test, I must be honest with you, is one of the best tests I've ever found. It works so well and gives you so much information. A really good idea if you are going to get into pediatrics to invest in a pediatric autorefractor, and a good one. There's a lot of stuff out there, so do your homework a little bit. And I hope you learned something from that. I really, if you have any questions, please email me, or some of you got my cell number, phone me or WhatsApp me, whatever it is. I'll be happy to help, and I hope you found that interesting, and good luck. Stay safe, stay sane. Yeah. My husband cut my hair, so yeah, COVID hairstyles are the new thing. Don't know when that's going to come right, but yes, good luck guys, and hopefully see you guys soon. Get well. Ciao.